what's up, Flipside? Sorry I can't be with you guys this week. I am actually out of town, but wanted to do a video lesson this week so that we can continue in our series, The Old Folks. So today we're actually going to be talking about the character of Elijah. He's got a pretty wild story, and so I hope you guys are excited for this. So here we go, the story of Elijah in our series, The Old Folks. So the story of Elijah. I don't know how much you guys know about Elijah, but the main thing that you need to know is that Elijah was a prophet. And a prophet was somebody who delivered the word of the Lord to whoever God told him to go talk to. And in this case, Elijah is actually in the kingdom of Israel. And it's important to know that at this time, Israel is actually divided. You've got the kingdom of Judah and you've got the kingdom of Israel. And so Elijah's down in the kingdom of Israel. And at this time, Israel is being led by a king, and his name was Ahab. And Ahab was a very, very bad dude. Ahab was one of those kings that it says he did evil in the Lord's sight. And in fact, he did more evil than a lot of the kings before him. But what's even worse is that Ahab was married to a lady named Jezebel. She was queen, and it says that she was even worse than Ahab was. And so this is who Elijah is charged with being a prophet to. But it's not just Ahab and Jezebel, because Elijah is supposed to deliver the word of the Lord to Israel, to God's people, and yet God's people are not following him. They're following the god of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, and that's the god of Baal. And Baal was not a god worth following. In fact, he was a false god. He wasn't even real. And yet this is who Israel's following, and this is who Elijah is told to go and be a prophet to, the kingdom of Israel, a kingdom that's not following God. And so I want to highlight two stories in Elijah's life, and they illustrate this main point. God is stronger than anything that you could ever face. And Elijah is going to learn this firsthand, and in addition, there's going to be some people that Elijah interacts with who are also going to learn this fact, that God is stronger than anything that they could ever face. And so, if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to 1 Kings 17 and 18. And that's where we're going to be camped out today for our lesson. And this is really where the story of Elijah picks up. And we see right off the bat, Elijah, he gets this dream, this vision from the Lord in 1 Kings 17. And in that vision, God tells him to go to the city of Zarephath. And in this city, God says, you are going to meet a widow. And a widow is someone, it's a woman who has lost her husband. He's dead. He's no longer alive. And he says, you're going to meet this widow. You're going to meet her at the entrance of the city. And then you're going to go and stay with her. And I'm going to do something profound in her life. And you are going to be my spokesperson. I'm sending you here to be that light, that hope in their life that points them to me. And so Elijah goes. He's faithful to God, and he goes to Zarephath, and he gets to the entrance, and he meets this widow. And he sees her gathering sticks, and he tells her, I've come here, and I'm going to stay with you. God has told me to stay with you. So can we go back to your place? So they go back to the lady's home, where she lives with her son. It's just the two of them. Again, her husband has died. He's passed away. She's a widow. And what we also need to know is that in this time, the nation of Israel was going through a crazy famine. There's no food. They're starving. You can't, if you wanted to go buy food, it's going to be insanely expensive if there even is food available. And so this lady, she knows this famine, and she was gathering sticks to prepare a meal. And so Elijah tells her, hey, would you prepare a meal for us? He's been traveling, he's hungry. And the lady says, well, that's what I was doing. I was gathering sticks to make bread for myself and my son. And after I make this bread, I will be all out of oil and flour. I'll have nothing left. So I was going to make this meal for myself and my son. We were going to eat it, and then we're going to die. Literally, guys, they were going to starve to death. That's what her plan was. And Elijah changes that plan a little bit because of what God tells him to say. And Elijah says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to make me a loaf of bread first. Then I want you to make food for yourself and your son. Do this, and God says that your oil jar and your flour jar, they will never run out. You will have food that will sustain you through this famine. I'm sure at this point the lady's probably like, okay, this is a little crazy. Like, this is our last meal. If I prepare it for him and we have nothing left, then we don't get a final meal. And she's trying to care for her son. She's all that he has left. But she's faithful. She's faithful to God. She's faithful to what Elijah tells her to do. She makes Elijah food, and then she makes food for herself and her son. And God, true to his word, he doesn't let that oil jar or that flour jar run out. He performs a miracle. There is more oil, there is more flour, there is more ingredients to continue to make food, to continue to allow them to survive, to be sustained through this famine. And it's crazy, because I've got to think that that lady in that moment, as she's picking up those sticks, she's probably thinking, man, I'm a failure. I've let my son down. I'm worthless. I have no value. I can't provide. She's probably beating herself up internally. The internal struggles that she's facing at this point probably seem completely overwhelming. And yet God is stronger than anything that she could face, anything that she could think about herself. Because God thinks differently about her. God sees her, he sees her situation, and he says, you are loved and you are cared for. And I'm going to provide for you. And he sends Elijah to be his spokesperson, to be his hands and feet. And Elijah ends up staying with this woman and her son. And he even goes on at one point later in the story, the woman's son actually dies. And Elijah had already left at this point, but he goes all the way back because God tells him to. And he actually, through God's power, he brings this boy back to life. God raises this woman's son from the dead. It's an unbelievable story to think about. And it's incredible too, because this is a small little intimate setting. It's just Elijah and this widow and her son. It's not anything big and extravagant. It's small. It's in the confines of this home. And yet God proves twice that he is stronger than anything that this woman and her son could face. Anything that stands before Elijah, God is stronger than all of those things. And so why do we start with this story, guys? Because I want you guys to understand that God can work in those small settings. He doesn't need the big, extravagant, wild, and crazy to show himself as powerful. He can show himself as powerful even in the confines of a home, in the lives of just 3 people. God can do incredible things there. He can prove that he is stronger than anything you could face. But that's not the end of the story. That's not the end of the road for Elijah, because, as I said earlier, Elijah's in a land that is completely hostile towards God. They're not following God. Israel has abandoned God. And they're following the god Baal, the god of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. And in this story, if we actually go over to 1 Kings 18, we see Elijah getting ready to face probably his most daunting task yet. So Elijah's told to go and speak to King Ahab, to tell him, look, you're doing this wrong. You need to turn back to God and follow God, because if you don't, there's going to be consequences. And yet Ahab and Jezebel refuse to listen. They're like, no, we follow Baal. And Baal is our God, and that's who we will serve. And so God tells Elijah, hey, let's set this whole thing up here. And so Elijah says, hey, Ahab, let's put that to the test. Let's put our gods to the test. Let's see whose God is the true God. And so they end up going to this place called Mount Carmel. And it's up on Mount Carmel that God does something unbelievable. You see, Ahab had 400 prophets of Baal. So that means Ahab and Queen Jezebel had 400 people, kind of think like priests, almost like pastors in a sense, that were fully devoted to worshiping Baal and helping God's people worship Baal. God's people worship Baal. And they did. And so Elijah's going to battle against these 400 prophets of Baal. And this is the scenario that we see. Elijah tells him, here's what you're going to do. Set up this altar. Build an altar. And on that altar, you're going to put a sacrifice. And then you're going to call upon Baal, and you're going to tell him, hey, burn this sacrifice up. Burn it up in fire. And that's going to prove that you are a powerful God, that you are the true God. And Elijah says, then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to build an altar. I'm going to sacrifice to God, Yahweh, the God of Israel, and I'm going to ask him to burn up this sacrifice. And whichever God burns up the sacrifice, that's the true God. That's the God that Israel should follow. And so they accept the challenge. And the prophets of Baal, they set up this intricate altar, and they put the sacrifice on it, and then they begin to call on Baal. And it says that they're yelling to him, they're chanting. They even go as far as to cut themselves, to mutilate themselves, to hurt themselves, trying to get Baal's attention. And guys, nothing happens. And it's even funny, God throws a little humor in the story because Elijah starts to taunt him a little bit. He's like, maybe he's asleep. Maybe you got to be a little bit louder so that you wake him up, and then maybe he'll do something. But Elijah knows it's worthless. They're not going to wake him up. He's not even real. And so then at this point, Elijah says, all right, my turn. And so Elijah sets up an altar, and it's a simple altar. He uses 12 stones, one for each of the tribes of Israel, and then even around that, he digs a trench, about a foot deep. And he says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put the sacrifice on this altar, we're going to cut it up, and then we are going to fill that trench with water, and then we're going to douse the sacrifice in water, like buckets full, bucket after bucket after bucket. We're going to soak this thing. Because things that are soaked in water that are wet, they don't burn. And Elijah knows this, but he's just setting it up. And so he does this. They soak the whole thing. And then Elijah gives a simple prayer to God, a simple request. He's like, God, show these people who you are. Show these people that you are the one true God. And send down fire and burn up this sacrifice. And guys, oh man, does God show up. He sends down fire, but he sends down fire that burns up the sacrifice, it burns up the altar, it burns up the water in the trench. It's so hot, it burns up everything. And the people are amazed. I mean, they're in shock, awe, probably terror too, at this display that God just did. And it's the proof that God was the one true God. That there is no Baal. He's not real. Not a God. He can't do anything. But that Israel had been following a false God. And in this moment, it's their clear picture that they have got to turn back to God. The one who had led them out of Egypt, the one who had brought them through the promised land, who had established them, that's the God that they're supposed to be following, that they had forgotten about, but that they're supposed to be following. And so God then tells Elijah, look, we can't let the prophets of Baal go. Because if we do, they're going to continue to lead my people astray. And so it says Elijah and the people of Israel, they kill all of the prophets of Baal, all 400 of them. They don't let them live. Because they're like, you're false gods. You have been leading Israel astray. You have been sinful. You have been completely against God, Yahweh, the Lord. And that can't go unpunished. And that's what happens, guys. God does a crazy miracle to get his people's attention to say, look, you have been following the wrong God and you need to follow me. And he brings his people back through what Elijah does there on Mount Carmel. And it's an unbelievable story. But why do I tell you this story? I tell you this story, guys, because not only will you deal with internal struggles, the thoughts and stuff that you're thinking about, like the woman at Zarephath who was thinking, man, if she's gathering that stuff, I'm a failure, I can't provide, I'm worthless. If I was better, maybe I could have kept us alive. Those internal struggles. But guys, there's also external struggles that you're going to face. People that will be against you. Situations that won't be in your favor. Guys, you'll be the minority. You'll be the odd man out. And guys, in those moments, in those external struggles, you have to remember that God is stronger than anything that you're going to face. Elijah was against 400 prophets of Baal, a king and a queen, and an entire nation that did not follow God. And it was just him and God. And he was like, that's more than enough. That's all we need. We don't need anything else. Because God is far stronger than anything they could throw against me. And so what do we do with this, guys? I want to leave you with something practical so that you can say, man, I can do something with this. There's something that I can remember. And so guys, here's what I want to leave you guys with. The first thing would be this. want you to call upon God when you face a tough challenge. Elijah faced challenges that by himself, as just a human man, he couldn't do anything about. He couldn't provide more food because there was a famine in the land. It's not like he was filthy rich, had all this money, or had this secret supply of food that he could supply them with. No. He knew the only way that we can do this is through God. God has to do something. And so Elijah knows that he's got to call upon God in those tough situations. But additionally, guys, he calls upon God with great faith. Elijah knows God can do this. He's already seen God at work. He's been a prophet of God for a good while now. He has seen God do incredible things. And so he calls upon God with great faith, saying, God, okay, if you're going to send me here, then you've got to do something. And I believe you can do it. So I'm going to go. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to have faith that you're doing this for a reason. But God, we need you to show up. We need you to do something incredible. So guys, that's the first thing to remember, is that we have to call upon God in tough challenges, because God is faithful to be with us in those challenges. The second thing would be this. Guys, you got to spend regular daily time with God. We know that Elijah did this. We know that Elijah did this because he was a prophet of God. He was consistently delivering the word of the Lord to the people that God told him to speak to. But guys, there's something else too. It wasn't enough that Elijah just spent daily time with God. It was time that allowed him to grow deeper. It was intentional. It had purpose. It allowed him to know God on a deeper level. And additionally, guys, it was consistent. We understand this idea of daily, but consistently he would spend time in prayer. He would be understanding and reading the word of the Lord that he had access to. He would be listening to God, saying, God, what do you want to say to me? What do you want to teach me? What do you want me to deliver to the people? It was deep and it was consistent. And guys, our time with the Lord has to be the same way. It can't just be this, I'm good with just 2 to 3 minutes. I'll read one verse and I'll call it good. Nah, guys, we've got to spend deep and consistent time with God so that we can grow, so that we can learn about God's character, so that we can hear from him. That's what Elijah did. And it gave him the confidence to be able to be in these situations that were so difficult that he himself as a man could not do anything about. It gave him the confidence to know that I can stand in these. I can handle this because God is with me. Because I have spent so much time with him that I know that he is faithful and I know how powerful he is. So guys, that second thing is we've got to have that daily, consistent, deep time with God. And the third thing would be this. The third thing would be you got to stand your ground. Guys, Elijah, especially in that story against the prophets of Baal, he was against 400 people, a king, a queen, and a nation. Potentially millions of people. And yet Elijah said, I know that if I have God on my side, I have all I need. I don't need anything else. I'm good. And so guys, we have to be able to stand our ground. Guys, and one of the things we've got to remember is God is with us. And God will fight for you. Because in that story with the prophets of Baal, it was God who burned up that sacrifice. It was God who performed the miracle. It wasn't Elijah. Elijah was just a man. But God did that. God fought for Elijah. And God fights for his people. He fights for us. And so guys, we have to have confidence that God is with us, and we have to stand our ground in that. Even if that means, you know what, you're in school and the people around you don't believe in God, and they think believing in God and going to church is a waste of time. We have to stand our ground. Guys, if you're telling somebody about Jesus and they're trying to come against you and be like, that's foolish, that's dumb, stand your ground. God is with you. If you're facing a challenging circumstance, maybe you're sick, maybe you know someone who's sick, maybe it's financial troubles, whatever it might be, guys, you have to remember that God is with you. And if God is with you, you can stand your ground. You can have confidence because he's faithful to those who obey him and who are his sons and his daughters. So guys, remember those three things. Call upon God in those tough situations, but call upon God also daily. Have that deep and consistent time that you spend with God so that you can stand your ground. so that you can stand firm in what God has done in your life, just the way Elijah did, so that you can remember that God is stronger than anything that you are going to face. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter the internal struggles that you're facing, the things that you're thinking about yourself. It doesn't matter the external struggles that come against you. Guys, God is stronger than any of the things that you could ever face. So I want to leave you guys with a couple questions as you guys go into small groups. Those questions are going to be up on the screen. I want you guys to take a picture of those, and I want you guys to talk about those. And I want you guys to have good dialogue as you kind of recap this lesson and thinking about, man, what are some tough situations that you faced recently? You know, what does your daily time with God look like? And what would you need to stand your ground? How can you stand your ground? Where can you stand your ground? And so guys, I hope that your discussion time in small group is great. I hope it's fruitful. I hope you guys learn something. And again, I'm sorry that I can't be with you guys this weekend. I miss you guys, but I'm excited for next weekend with the fall party. So if you haven't signed up, head over to the church website and sign up for that. It's going to be a great time, but I'm looking forward to being back with you guys soon. And thanks for tuning in, guys. Miss you guys, love you guys, and we'll see you soon. Peace.